Hello and welcome to another Indie Sunday. Today we're going to be playing the start of the Sekimeiya Spun Glass. Now, I say we're going to be playing the start. I've actually read through quite a bit in regards to this game in terms of reviews and Steam and stuff like that. And this game is long. And when I say long, I mean long. Like 50 hours long or more. So there was one Steam review of a guy who had like 400 hours. So I don't think we're even going to make a dent into the story of it in if we played like 2 or 3 hours, and I'm probably not going to play that long either. Other things about it. It has supposedly an absolutely amazing mystery, but some other aspects of the game may be slightly lacking from what I've read. And, there's mysteries that hook you right from the beginning, and there's mysteries that need a little bit of time to build up, and this is apparently one of the latter. So, let's hope the first hour or so that I might play right now is not too uneventful, but let's just go with it and see how it's like. Another thing you probably won't notice too much, like there's a very slight black bar at the top and a thing at the bottom as well, although I can't even really fully tell it. That's just because essentially I'm not playing it in full screen, because if I play it in full screen, my mouse disappears, which shouldn't necessarily be a problem in a visual novel game, but it's still odd, and I'd rather not have that. And I don't necessarily know what kind of functions are needed for, and the game capture doesn't work either. So essentially I'm playing it in 1920 by 1080, sort of like a half of my screen, and I've adjusted the screen capture to that. So now with that out of the way, we're ready to go. Let's start. December 15th, 2011. I'd been mindlessly staring at the wall in front of me for a few minutes. When I'd finally registered, I slowly spun around. I'd always thought I'd be quick at adapting to sudden changes, but I'd recently realized how mistaken I'd been. Still unable to process everything, my brain kept struggling to accept that the previous few days had really happened. I wasn't familiar with the walls around me, but I'd always known of the place. Next to me was Shiroya, less willing to acknowledge her surroundings. Keeping her gaze on the floor, she suddenly spoke for the first time since we'd entered. I think it'll be time soon. Yeah, probably less than 20 minutes. That was all I managed to muster. Even though I was still the same Atsuki as always, it felt like I'd been rewritten into an entirely different entity in only a few days. I didn't try to say anything else. During the previous 2 weeks, I'd grown accustomed to those brief interactions with Shiroya. After I spoke, the lost look in her eyes returned. We had both agreed to come together, but it seemed like neither of us knew what we were doing. We kept awkwardly scanning the vast hall, moving toward tiny steps at a time and awaiting further instructions. Neither of us had any strength. I'd known Shiroya for more than 15 years, and not once had she looked so empty. On top of everything, I hadn't been able to make her feel any better. Despite that, at almost 9, we were inside Ashiya Tower. The biggest building of Yushibana, the town where we'd always lived. It was situated on the outskirts, and we had never entered it before. From the outside, the tower's contrast with its surroundings was immense. Beyond all the similar-looking houses, its size made it visible anywhere in the town. It was that contrast which had caused it to be called a tower, but it was only as big as an urban building. The structure itself was more or less a cube, essentially as wide as it was tall, but it seemed towering to people who had spent their whole lives in a rural area. It was a place Shiroya and I had always avoided because of the stigma associated with it. A large portion of the citizens were against its existence due to the people who owned it and its unnatural size. I wasn't very familiar with the topic. Apparently decades in the past, when the building hadn't been anywhere near as large as it had been the Ashia family's residence. It was known that they were a shady family, but they never suffered any consequences. At that time, they held a silent power over the town, and over the years it gradually grew stronger. They became the image of Yoshibana. Anyone visiting from the outside knew about that family before anything else in the town. Over the years, the old residence transformed into a focal point for business and tourism. I'd never immersed myself in the matter, but that was common information that I couldn't even recall where I'd heard first. The place was some sort of museum, and behind it extended a mountain range that encircled Yoshibana. It was known for housing numerous caves that held valuable gemstones, so enthusiasts tended to visit often. The Ashia family had taken advantage of it and utilized their building as a gallery for the different gemstones that could be found in the nearby mountains. And when that happened, the part of the town in favor of the tower strengthened due to the increase of people who specialized in those gemstones. That was what caused a split in the population. The younger residents generally didn't mind Ashia, while the other maintained their private discontent. That was why we had never entered it. On the top of our more recent circumstances, I thought Shiria might have been experiencing a feeling of betrayal for simply being there. While I couldn't say I shared that strong of an emotion toward it, I wasn't very fond of the whole thing either. The reason why we were inside wasn't one I could easily put into words. There had been constant publicity about the day's event for 2 weeks. According to Ashia, they were going to showcase a major discovery, one found in the very same mountains around the town. But that wasn't something that particularly interested me, and I wasn't sure what to expect. The reason we had come to the tower wasn't anything as simple as curiosity. It was December 15th. Outside, the environment was cold and coated in snow, and while the temperature inside was regulated, we'd been outside for so long that we still felt unpleasant. I glanced at Shiria, who didn't return my look. Feeling slightly agitated, I turned a little. I could see a line of people who had come thanks to Ashia's ambitious advertisements. Shiria and I had been at the front of it for a long time. Next to us was a man I'd never seen before. He was tall and had dark hair, and like us, he seemed distant from everyone else. I hadn't seen him so much as look at me, so I hadn't given him a second thought. We were next to him because we would go see the gemstone in groups of 3. Since we'd been the initial 3 to show up, we formed the first group. The entrance fee had been expensive, but we'd paid it well in advance. From our perspective, it had been worth it. We remained by the door that would open at 9, simply waiting for that to happen. At our left was another door that would open at the same time, and according to what we'd been told, both led to the main floor of the tower. On that particular day, not many people seemed to care about that, as everyone who could be seen was part of our line. For a moment I wondered what the big deal was. Yoshibana wasn't a large town, so the amount of people waiting behind us was fairly impressive. All that for a gemstone didn't seem quite right to me. But perhaps it made sense, given that it was Ashia's event. They cared about appearances, as anyone could attest. They were in many lines of business, but the most important was looking good. Apart from the line, the only other people in the lobby were guards talking with a policeman, a woman behind the reception desk checking everyone's tickets, and a janitor who had been scrubbing the same part of the floor for a while. It was all unsettling and alien. The event itself was an abstract thing to me, and my view on the people who ran it was far from positive. All I could do was look at things and wait for it all to start. We'd been asked to leave our phones outside for the duration of our stay, as nothing of the sort was permitted in the building. That meant that I had no way of looking at the time. There weren't any clocks on the walls. Adding the fact that the person I was with was clearly uncomfortable and trying to hide it, the long wait had been much more tedious than I'd hoped. I continued looking at her, not knowing how to deal with the situation better. Finally, after minutes of looking down, she suddenly lifted her head as if she just remembered that she was in a public environment. Following behind, she looked at me and seemed to try to smile. But it was barely visible, before vanishing again. I kept falling back into negative thoughts. No matter how I tried, I couldn't help that. I needed to be stronger and help lift Shiroya out of the pit she was in, but that was tricky, seeing as I first had to get out of the same one. So I just struggled against my feelings, wishing all the while that I could go back to how things had been before. Minutes later, a well-dressed man who'd been standing near the entrance told us that if we weren't waiting for the event, we could go through the left door. Shortly after, a tall blonde woman wearing a suit entered through the one on the right. I'd seen her in a coat earlier, before she disappeared through one of the doors. She looked over everyone present and began to explain what the procedure would be. Sorry for the wait, everyone. We'll now begin the group entrances. My name is Naomi. I'll be chaperoning today's guided visit. As you likely already know, groups of 3 will move forward in turns. Each visit is estimated to take approximately 15 minutes. Once inside, I will personally explain what we have prepared, and I will also be available to answer questions within the specified time. Naomi's explanation was directed at everyone present, but it was hard to believe anyone farther back could have heard her. She continued in a monotone voice. Keep in mind that phones and video cameras are strictly prohibited. I ask for all of you to please be patient and await your turn. When her scripted message was over, she relaxed her posture and directed her look at us. You 3 are the first group, correct? Seconds later, nobody had answered. The 2 people at my side had barely paid attention to her, so I spoke before she would have to ask again. Yes. Alright then, please follow me to the event room to be the first to see the Sekimeiya. I'd heard that word many times recently, but before I could think, she turned around and walked through the same door she'd entered from. I looked to my right to check on Shiroya. Her demeanor hadn't changed, but she was aware of the situation. By the time I turned back, the man on my left had nearly reached the door. It seems he was taking the initiative despite his unenthused appearance. Rather, it was probably better to think of myself as lagging behind than him being proactive. I followed, motioning to Shiroya as I did. She approached me still wearing her heavy-looking coat. We found ourselves in a long hallway. We could see many doors lining each wall, some open and connected by a decorative handrail. However, there were no traces of Naomi or the man. The floor seemed pointlessly wide. Up to the end of the hall, I could see a number of security cameras hanging from the ceiling. As we started walking, unclear about where to go, I found it appropriate to try to talk with Shiroya again. Are you feeling better? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. She continued walking, assuming that was the end of our exchange. I tried to press it a bit further. You regret coming? No, of course not. I'm seriously glad we're here, I mean it. I know how you feel, okay? It's the same for me. It doesn't help a lot to say it, but I don't want to see you sad. I'm here because I want to be, Atsuki. I'm okay. This is where I need to be right now. Sorry, I must look terrible. She wasn't being very convincing. You know, this isn't something you need to apologize for. Nothing about this is your fault. I'm not so sure. I wish I didn't have to be a drag for you now. Hey, come on. If you want to leave, we still can. Don't feel like you have to push yourself for my sake. It's alright, thank you. Let's continue though. I was the one who wanted to come. Okay. We'd hoped coming to the exhibition would be for the better. Once it was settled that we wouldn't back out, I looked around shyly until a voice calling for us came from the middle of the hallway through an open door. You two, hurry up, the clock is ticking. Her unprofessional shout broke the silence and drew us forward. I saw her figure in a seemingly empty room. Through the other doors there were cabinets covered by red cloths. Good. We're all finally here. Now we can start. Once I went inside, I realized my initial impression had been wrong. The room would have been barren if it weren't for a single cabinet covered by a velvet curtain. The black-haired man was there, yet again looking entirely aloof and fixing his eyes on the plain opposite wall. Alright, it would be helpful if you could tell me your names, since you know mine. While she said that, she closed the door we'd come through, and I took notice of the security camera in one of the corners, which was fitting for the place we were in. There was another closed door in the opposite wall, so we had 15 minutes ahead of us where we would be shut inside. Naomi looked at me expectantly, probably because I'd been the one to speak earlier. Atsuki Hakutoki. Shiraya Mirana. Without being cajoled, Shiraya spoke her name. To my relief, she was looking directly at Naomi, and her posture was significantly less stiff than before. The black-haired man didn't respond immediately when we eyed him. And your name? Akaro Esata. Perfect. Happy to meet the three of you. It was hard to read him. He looked passive, but he must have been interested in the exhibition. Naomi moved aside and placed herself before the velvet curtain. Then she took out a keyring from her pocket as she got ready to begin the introduction. As you might already know, what's behind this curtain is not to be taken lightly, and being the first public view is a bigger privilege than you might think. What's being kept here is among the rarest pieces that we've ever seen, and it's only been 2 weeks since the discovery. We estimate that the value of this cabinet's contents is immense. A proper appraisal has already occurred, but more estimates will come forth as everyone realizes just what we have in our hands. Part of the experience is the touch, so I will open the glass and let you experience it yourselves. However, I must insist that you be gentle and keep your hands inside the cabinet at all times. We know, and don't need this introduction, so let's move along. You've been praising this find of yours in every advertisement. Let's see how your claims hold up. Akaro's sudden input took us by surprise, but it made it clear that he did care about the event. My apologies. Let's start then. Naomi put a small key into a lock on the left side of the cabinet and turned it. Admittedly, all the build-up was making me slightly curious, but for all I knew, we were talking about a slightly shining rock, nothing that would ever interest me very much. Let's stop with the teasing. Here's what you've come here to see, named the Sekimeiya. With one hand, she grabbed the bottom of the curtain and began to raise it. But even though my focus should have been on the cabinet, something else took priority. When I was least expecting it, smoke rose instead of the curtain, accompanied by a familiar putrid smell that invaded the room. What is this? Without bothering to ask myself questions, I tried to find Shiraya. At my right, I saw her face morphing into shock. Atsuki, what? Her last word faded out quietly, and it was then when I realized that my consciousness was getting cloudy. All of a sudden, all I could see was very dark smoke filling my field of vision. I couldn't believe it was happening again. Naomi's hand had immediately released the curtain, and she was trying to steady herself while covering her nose. I couldn't find Akaro until I looked down and saw that he had already fallen to the floor. The smoke filled up the entire room at once. In just a few seconds, my legs stopped responding, and all my efforts at getting my muscles to obey me were met with failure. At last, my entire body gave up, and I plummeted down. Thanks to the view I had from the floor, I could see Shiraya's outcome had not been any different, and from the falling noise I heard, the same could be said for Naomi. Behind Shiraya was the door we'd come through. The smoke had covered the ceiling, so everything was dark. Amidst the confusion, I was able to notice the lack of light under the door, something which should have been easily noticeable from such a dark place. When I ultimately accepted there was nothing I could do to salvage the situation, I had a few seconds where I could only think about what was going on. Our room and its surroundings were fully silent. I couldn't hear a thing despite what had happened, and I wasn't able to produce any noise. What the fuck had just happened? I was able to recognize how strange it was. Both doors had been closed, so I had no idea where the smoke had come from. Knowing the smoke was blotting out our awareness, I realized it had been done deliberately, and there were many reasons I could come up with as to why, going off of what we'd just been told. As my remaining consciousness faded away, I could only hope I would quickly wake up to see Shiraya again. I wanted to pretend that I knew nothing would happen, but the images came back to me, seeing that hole in the floor. My heartbeat slowed and became inaudible. I knew that resisting was completely futile, so I closed my eyes, hoping to fast forward to being awake again. The thought of dying there was pathetic, but without a choice in the matter, I resigned myself to what was happening. Before all my senses faded, the silence was broken by a loud alarm, which had taken a while to be broadcast after the appearance of the smoke. Further in the background, I briefly perceived a much fainter and rougher sound that I couldn't identify. I lay on the floor of that smoky room with 3 other people, completely powerless and clueless. Soon after the alarm played, the darkness became absolute, and all my thoughts vanished. Chapter 1: Foot of the Mountain. An indeterminate amount of time had passed. I was a complete mess, and a constant pain pounded against the interior of my skull. Nothing had changed, apart from the walls and ceiling, which had been tainted by the smoke. As I confirmed that I was still in the event room, I tried to battle the intense headache, mercilessly hammering me from the inside, focusing my vision in an attempt to spot Shiria. There she was, still on the floor. She hadn't moved since I'd blacked out. I used all the energy I could muster to try to rise, and after a few attempts I was able to sit up. While I crawled to Shiria, I looked behind me. As expected, Akro's body still lay on the floor, but he was far from my first priority. I reached Shiria and turned her face to me. Her eyes were half open and she seemed conscious, which was exactly what I needed to see. My sentence was cut off by dry coughing that took over my body. It seemed I'd inhaled a bit of the smoke, but it might have meant that we hadn't been unconscious for a long time. Yes, I think so. Her eyes opened fully and she tried to steady herself with an arm. That smoke, was it? Maybe. Listen, we'll find out what happened. Just stay there for a minute, okay? Do you feel okay? Yes. I could tell that she was barely keeping it together. She must have been afraid of the worst, just like I was, but that time we'd woken up safely. I looked around me. It was a bizarre sight, and the disgusting smell was still present after the smoke had faded. The room had been painted black, the curtains beautiful red, the walls, the ceiling, they'd all been corrupted by an ugly dark color, almost purple. The floor, however, had not received the same treatment. It had become grey, but it was nowhere near the strong black that had consumed the ceiling. And there was something much more important that I quickly noticed. Naomi's gone. She's not here. What? You're right. Where could she have gone? The door is open. The door we'd not gone through was very slightly ajar. Naomi could have woken up and left through it, maybe to understand what had happened after seeing that we were still knocked out. Even reaching that small conclusion took a lot out of me, but the headache was beginning to fade almost as quickly as it had come on. I noticed that voices had woken Akaro, who still hadn't moved at all. What the fuck is this? He felt his face with his hand as he grimaced. Then he slowly stood up and attempted to balance himself while perplexedly looking around him. Hey, what's all of this? You said Naomi's gone? What the fuck just happened? I think a lot of smoke suddenly appeared out of nowhere, right? Did it knock us out? For the first time he started a conversation with us. Before answering, I began to clean my face, as the smoke had created a sticky mask on it as well. I have no idea, but yes, that smoke must have had something in it that made us fall unconscious. And a few seconds before I fainted, a very loud alarm went off. An alarm? I must have fallen unconscious too fast. All I remember is getting very dizzy out of nowhere and falling over. I don't think I heard it either. Did it say anything? No, it was only a loud sound. While I was still attempting to stand up, Akira walked to the open door and looked through it. What the hell happened here? It's very dark, but the hallway's condition is the same. The walls and ceiling are black and I can't see anyone. The whole hallway's covered. How much smoke was there? Everyone must have evacuated when they heard the alarm, even though it came a bit after the smoke appeared. Did you see where the smoke came from? I didn't see anything and there's nothing here. No, but you're right. It surrounded us in an instant and it probably appeared in this room and in the hallways at the same time. Both of these doors were closed, so the origin had to have been here. Something must have happened while we were unconscious. Why are we alone though? There were police officers outside. Why haven't they come? We couldn't answer. Still a bit disoriented, I forced my neck to turn. The only thing in the room was the covered cabinet. However, I doubt that the Sekimeiya would still be there. The easiest conclusion to reach was that the smoke had been part of an attack designed to steal it. The smoke wasn't released in the other rooms in the hallway. Everything was giving me a surreal vibe. I had no idea what was going on, but at first glance the danger seemed to have faded away. My headache was nearly gone, thankfully. That meant that I could start thinking things through. What had happened? Why had it happened? How was I going to find the person responsible? Maybe I was just trying to distract myself from reality by thinking things like that, but I had a personal stake in it. I couldn't forgive whoever was responsible. Shira probably felt the same way. We couldn't just ignore it, and someone was missing. The room was empty, and it had been empty before we'd fallen unconscious. Only the cabinet had been with us, but if the smoke had come out of it, it wouldn't have surrounded us so fast. We had been stained, but not as much on our lower parts of our bodies. The ceiling was very dark, whereas the floor not so much. The smoke's density must have been low. Did that mean that the origin of the smoke had been the very center of the room? How did that make any sense? It could have also come from all of the walls simultaneously, but not like at floor heights, but sort of halfway up. Shira staggered slightly. I reached out to try and hold her shoulder, but as my body was still recovering, both of us fell back to the floor. Without looking at us, Akaro walked to the door we'd entered through. It happened here too. Yeah, when I fell to the floor, I noticed there was no light below that door. Given how dark the room had become, I thought the hallway must have been just as dark. The smoke was released at the same time, even though both places looked empty. What the fuck is this about? That woman disappeared, but she fell unconscious too, didn't she? And you're right, why is no one else here? Although those points were very strange, I was still relieved that none of us had been harmed. I lay on the floor for a bit, attempting to gather more strength. When thoughts came to me, it was calming to realize that they were different from what had recently filled my head. This room connects two parallel hallways, which were attacked alongside this room all at once. Was this done to isolate us? Someone attacked the building to steal the Sekimeiya, right? That must have been the intention. The smoke formed an easy pathway for whoever had planned it to make their way here, obtain the Sekimeiya and leave. It sounds like a messy and risky plan, but it's the obvious thing that comes to mind. The open door seems to reinforce it, even though Naomi must have left through one anyway. Do I have to conclude that Naomi was part of this, and while we were out she took the Sekimeiya and left? Pointing this much suspicion at herself? Being a staff member, she'd know many things about the security system, and we were the first group to come, meaning out of the four, she was the only one that wasn't part of the first visit coincidentally. Or, I could say that if I knew Akaro at all, I did think he looked distant from everything else. Maybe Akaro was aware of the fact that smoke would appear. He immediately faked his unconsciousness by throwing himself to the floor, knowing he would avoid breathing anything from the upper half of the room. The fact the floor is barely stained proves the smoke never came down. Once we're all out of it, he obtains the Sekimeiya. I should also consider that the smoke first arose shortly after Naomi unlocked the cabinet. This doesn't mean much, given she'd fall unconscious and leave the key available to be picked up, but if whoever did this didn't know much about the cabinet's mechanism, it makes sense they waited until it was unlocked. But how did they know exactly when that was? Doesn't this mean that they must have been inside the room? Or again, doesn't this mean that only Akaro could have done it? Assuming this precise timing actually happened, how did he trigger the smoke? It could simply be that he gave some sort of signal to someone else outside, but phones aren't allowed here. After he regained consciousness, he seemed to be perfectly fine physically. However, the mass difference between his body and our 19-year-old one's is very noticeable. It makes sense that the substance had a somewhat weaker effect on him. Is Akaro in possession of the Sekimeiya right now, or did he leave it somewhere? If so, why did he come back? Only to not look suspicious? But this doesn't explain Naomi's disappearance. And how did the smoke appear? Or why did the alarm sound late? And what kind of risky plan is this? I grimaced. I was getting carried away without realizing how far I was going. In the first place, it was ridiculous to suspect anyone until I had information. But I knew. I could never let things remain as they were. Someone was responsible and I wouldn't let them get away. I only had to bide my time. Before I could stand, I realized there was another venue open to me. There was a security camera on the ceiling. If someone was looking at the footage and the smoke came out of an automated system, this would make a lot more sense. However, it doesn't mean Akuro couldn't simply have been the one to wait for the automated smoke to then follow with whatever plan they had. This must have happened during the first visit for a reason. It means that whoever was looking at the right footage would have been the one to activate the smoke system. I was doing it again, almost like a coping mechanism. I had to make sure Shira was really okay before anything else. When I attempted to lift my head, my body thankfully obeyed. I stared at the curtain that concealed the so-called Sekimeiya. It was dark and the substance the smoke was composed of had dried up on it. Can you stand up? I think so. Supporting each other, Shira and I slowly steadied ourselves. Then I realized Akuro had gone to the hallway. Finally, thank goodness. A shout came from the same area. Oh, it was a feminine voice, which at least indicated we weren't alone. We walked to it slowly as I wiped more of the solidified substance off of myself. I was curious to see if the Sekimeiya was still in the cabinet, but we would find that out very soon regardless. Yeah, that was what I was thinking as well. You should first of all check that it was actually stolen before you come to conclusions on who stole it. The hallway was almost as dark as the room. The smoke had coated every light bulb, but since there were many of them, some light could make it past the barrier. The smoke had created a furrow cover on the walls and ceilings, which must have been an intended result. It had set up a dark environment, but that couldn't be the sole purpose. Something had been added to the smoke to create the same effect on every surface it touched. Close to the start of the hallway, near the door Naomi had first appeared through, I saw human figures. Our approaching footsteps were noticed by one, and it rose from its knees. We got closer and saw two more people kneeling down. Akuro was with them, and after finally arriving where they were, I noticed a small body on the floor. Who is that? E? Isla's finally waking up, thank God. Ah, probably a woman, yeah. That woman was the person we'd heard. She had the little girl on her lap and was looking at her closed eyes with concern. I see. So you three were also not able to evacuate. The person who had stood up was a well-dressed old man. As he said that, the two kneeling people turned their heads to face us. But the words "not able to evacuate" had sounded darker than I'd expected, especially due to his rough voice. Is she okay? I think so. She's finally breathing fine. Shiraya sat next to the others and worriedly looked at the girl who'd been called Isla. Next to them was a guy my age who was staring at the girl in silence. Smoke appeared out of nowhere and knocked us out. Do you know what happened? I'm afraid I don't. You were in the event room, right? Shouldn't another woman be with you? Naomi, yes. She was gone when we woke up. Despite the dim light, I was able to discern his frown. I'm pretty sure she passed out too, but the door to the other hallway was open when we woke up. She left while you were still unconscious. That's strange. I inspected this floor a bit and didn't find her. Is that strange? Maybe she exited the building entirely. When his look lowered again, I realized there was something very important that we were missing. Why was nobody else there? Why had the unconscious child not been taken outside at the very least? She couldn't have left. If she fell unconscious like the rest of you, she still has to be here. What? You can't get out. The man didn't answer immediately, so I took that time to look him over. Due to the lighting, I'd just gotten the impression that he was a simple, well-dressed old man, but those weren't casual clothes. He's a security officer. Did all of you hear the alarm that played throughout the building? After I heard it, I saw all the smoke. Those words made me consider an important detail. His shirt was white and a lot less stained than ours, indicating that it hadn't been hit by the smoke during its release. In contrast, the woman and the other guy had the same smoke pattern we did, being more stained on their top halves. The stature of the child had made her face the main target. I am responsible for this building's security system. When the smoke appeared, I was in the security room found in the other hallway. Since today was a special day, most of the visitors were in the lobby awaiting their turn for the event, so they had no problem leaving safely when they saw the smoke. You might know that this tower has many floors, but only this one is open to the public, and no one was on the higher levels. It was a big shock to see all that smoke, so I panicked and spent a while in the security room trying to figure out what had happened.
When I realized I couldn't get anywhere, I exited and began searching through this floor. It seems you all were the first two groups of three for today's event.
Yes, we were told to wait here after the first group moved forward. Oh, that's right. I remember seeing her earlier now that I look at her closer. I also recalled seeing the three of them behind us in the lobby. I was still trying to understand the man's words, though as he had said the security room was in the other hallway. At the same time, we kept cleaning the smoke off our bodies until only a few traces remained. You said you saw the smoke, but your clothes are much cleaner than ours. Did it not hit you?
That's right. I didn't leave the room while it was in the hallway. When I said I saw the smoke, I was talking about the security cameras.
Oh, I see. So he was the person I just accused in my head.
I wasn't able to figure anything out through the cameras, unfortunately. When I left a few minutes later, I saw all the walls were black.
I knew he was slowly giving me information, so I didn't want to interrupt him. However, more questions were coming to my mind, such as why he hadn't come across our group first. Wait, you saw what the hallway looked like after you left the security room? Didn't you have enough security cameras to see it from there? I couldn't help myself from asking for details. The more I tried to coast through things, the more I resisted it. I needed to know as much as possible.
No, the thing is they became useless after the smoke appeared. It instantly covered the lens of every camera that was hit by it.
That makes sense. It must be why the smoke created this film on every surface it touched. It worked to disable the cameras.
Yes, while I was there, I had no way to know what was happening in the hallways or in the event room. I took my time to look at the footage of all the other rooms, but I didn't see anything suspicious at all. No people either. But I should get into what's more important. The alarm that played wasn't your usual emergency alarm, it was one that hadn't played before. I said that I stayed in the security room out of panic, but that's not all. Even if I'd left, it would have been pointless. One of the special functions of the alarm is to shut down all methods of escape. This means that we have no way to leave this building and that people outside can't enter.
Although I've kind of been anticipating those words, it was still a heavy blow. Shira and I looked at each other. It seemed everything insisted on getting worse.
Hang on, what the fuck? You're saying that we're trapped here? How long does it close the exit for? Why? And is there no way to undo it or contact the outside?
It closes all the exit routes for 12 hours. The reason as to why is a bit complicated and for our purposes confidential. I'm sorry, but I can't get into that. It's a burglary alarm that makes sure that the thief of the object of burglary is not able to leave the building.
Not all that complicated. As for a way to contact the outside, there should be one. We can try it.
Shiroya wasn't faring well, and Akuro seemed to be in complete disbelief at what he was hearing. Hey, it's going to be fine, okay? Yeah, okay. I turned back to the others. Barring Akuro, none of them seemed very surprised about the situation. Is this not a shock for you?
I already told them. Getting Isla out of here would normally have been the first thing any of us would have done.
It didn't seem like the type of building to have medical equipment stored in it, so the woman must have immediately tried to extract who I could only assume was her daughter. There was no reason to think that some secret entrance existed, so I more or less had to assume that we really were trapped for half a day. Half a day, he says. The existence of such an alarm seemed absurd, but at first glance it also might have succeeded at trapping whoever had been responsible for the smoke. So, you're right, Naomi still has to be here. And is that it? I get that most people were in the lobby, but if someone else had entered the hallways, they couldn't have evacuated either.
Is it possible the smoke in the hallway wasn't as dense, which gave people time to run from it before the alarm went off?
No, that can't be. The guy who'd remained quiet finally spoke. We were right here when the smoke appeared. The moment we inhaled a bit of it, we were out like a light. We pretty much collapsed instantly.
I see, then I couldn't tell you.
From what I could see from there, the other rooms in the hallway were clean. If someone had been in one, they had to have been trapped too. I could recall that the alarm had played approximately 20 seconds after the smoke's appearance, but it was unlikely that had been enough time for it to entirely dissipate.
I can't believe what you're telling us. What the fuck does this mean? Why are we trapped here? I sincerely apologize. I'm confused as well, but there's nothing I can tell you. We'll have to be here all day, but I'll try to figure out what happened. My name is Kate Kuiji. It was ridiculous, but we couldn't fight it. After a period of silence where nobody knew how to react, the woman spoke. She's Isla, my daughter. She's been unconscious since the smoke appeared, but her breathing's steadier now. I'm Irina. Oh, I'm Shiria. For a second I had to think about it. Who? And my name's Atsuki. We came here together. How old is she? She'll be 10 in a bit more than a week. Her birthday is 2 days before Christmas. Realizing the rest of his group had introduced themselves, the guy followed. I'm Sai. We looked back at the man separated from us. Akuro. Immediately the silence returned. What the hell had happened? I thought back on the wordless alarm that had locked us in. It had lacked a message, seemingly only designed to tell us that we'd been trapped. It made sense if the culprit was one of us, but not even the staff member who was still here had any idea who it could have been, which made things difficult. And the target of the attack, it had to be the Sekimeiya. There was no way it wasn't related. The very first showing of a newly discovered gemstone being interrupted meant only one thing. It could have been a distraction. It could have been what they want you to think. We hadn't checked whether the Sekimeiya was still in the room, but it was confirmed that it was still in the building with us, even if it had been taken out of its cabinet. The attack had been deliberate. That was the most important point. Whoever was responsible, I wanted to find them out and expose them. It was deeply personal. Oh no, never mind. That's just the I for Isla. We all glanced at Isla's pained face. After the second cough, she proceeded to slightly open her eyes. Isla, finally, are you okay? How do you feel? Irina's sudden outburst seemed to confuse her daughter. She raised her head and blinked blearily at all of us. Looking back at her mother, she coughed weakly again and spoke. Where are we? What are we doing here? Her disorientation definitely wasn't helped by the fact that all the walls were stained black. Shiria seemed like she wanted to say something, but she held back and let Irina speak. We're still inside Ashia Tower. Do you remember all that smoke? It knocked us out and you're the last one to wake up. Irina stroked Isla's hair gently, which seemed to soothe her. Weren't we going to see the Sekimeiya? I'm trying to remember what happened after that, but I can't. Did we ever do that? No, sweetie. We were waiting for that in this very hallway when the smoke came out. Do you not remember? Oh, smoke? I'm not sure. Is this that hallway? Why is everything black? That's also the smoke's doing. It stained everything it touched. Shira finally spoke up. Isla seemed to realize that everyone else had faint black stains on her clothes, so she looked down at her own to find them almost completely clean. At her height, her head had been primarily affected, but Irina had evidently wiped off the remnants already. You feel okay? You've been out for a long time. I was really worried. Sorry, I think I feel okay, but my head hurts. But why are we here? Why is there no light? Why are we alone? We all looked at each other, and for a few seconds nobody knew how to answer. Pate quickly decided it was his job to do so. We're not aware of what caused the smoke, but it must have triggered a special alarm that shut down all entrance and exit methods. That means that we will have to stay here for the next 12 hours, and it's possible there's only 8 of us who didn't evacuate in time. We all slightly lowered our heads, unsure whether his abrupt explanation had been a good idea to direct at a kid who had just woken up. Isla processed that information in silence for a minute. I didn't expect she'd take it well, but against my own prediction, she passively tossed out some words in response. Oh, I see. So we're going to be here for 12 hours. What will we do until then? I was relieved that she hadn't reacted badly. Telling a kid to stay put somewhere for many hours was something that could have gone much worse. She can run around the hallways. Sadly, there is not much to do here. This first floor is filled with exhibition rooms, and it's officially called the Crystal Floor in reference to all the gems. The upper floors are nothing but offices, and I'm afraid they're as uninteresting as they sound. They're offices. The Does that mean we could use them to communicate with the outside? Is that what you meant earlier when you said that could be possible? Oh, no. Usually that would be the case, but the local internet connection is also something that the alarm shuts down, precisely to block all communication methods. The internet connection was cut? Will it come back when the exit opens? Yes, we can't access it until then. There is no phone either, and I don't have mine here.
What did you mean then? How do we have any way to speak to anyone outside?
The room where I work, the security room, has a function that lets us enable communication with the outside. That one should not be out of commission.
That was slightly relieving. If we could talk with people and understand the situation better, that would make the wait much more bearable. However, it seemed strange to me that a communication method wouldn't be disabled. Entirely blocking off the exit and shutting down the internet connection had seemed to indicate the goal was to fully isolate the interior. Ignoring one method sounded a bit strange, which must have meant it wasn't one anyone who would know how to access. Isla stood up and brushed herself off. She seemed ready to say something else, but a nearby sound startled us. We turned to face it and were met with a door opening. It was the one that led to the lobby. Had someone else gotten trapped? I thought that until I saw a sign next to the door. Then I realized he hadn't said anything since he told us his name. His left hand was gripping the knob.
Where are you going?
It looked like we were all a little confused that he'd been about to leave without warning. I'm going to check the lobby. I'm not doubting what Kate has said, but I haven't personally seen the exit closed, so I'm curious if it could be forced open, for example. Nobody said anything. Instead, everyone but Shireo, who was still sitting down, began to slowly walk to the door. I took the opportunity to pull her aside and check on her. This was a deliberate attack and I want to find out who did it if I can. Are you okay with that? Why are you asking me that? If you want to just hole up in a room for 12 hours, I'll respect it, but I don't want the person or people responsible getting away, and I think you feel the same way. Yeah, I just don't want you to get caught up in something dangerous, Atsuki. It's not like I'm some detective, I know that, but if you notice someone lying or find out something I don't, I want to know. I just figure if we really are trapped here, we should keep track of what happens. The culprit must have gotten trapped, so we can't trust anyone here. I know. Usually the police would handle this, but if the cameras are all covered, there might be no records. And if they got away, I'd... I knew perfectly well what she meant without her finishing the sentence. Well, I don't. I'm hoping that whoever did this was stupid enough to get caught on camera before that happened, but we'll see. I know you're right, we're not the police, I just don't know who we can trust. Sorry, I'm just trying to process everything. I didn't mean to be so quiet until now. I feel the same way you do. Maybe I feel worse actually. I hate this. I want this to be over. Yeah, me too. Let's get going. I helped Shiria to her feet and we headed to where everyone else had gone. As if we'd stepped into another world, the lobby looked almost as it had been when we'd last been there. The lights weren't blackened, but some had been turned off, most likely automatically. Only a bit of the smoke had snuck through the gaps of the doors, forming a dark outline around them. It just sounds so wrong. That would have been all if it weren't for the metal shutter blocking the door we'd entered through. Aside from the reception desk, the only things of note in the room were the couch and cleaning bucket. Everyone seemed to have lapsed into silence except for Kate, who simply appeared as if he didn't know what to tell us. Oh, guess there's no way we're opening that.
Isn't it a bit too much? Why would they trap us like this? I agree that this looks over the top, but I'm afraid the same has occurred with every window of the tower, and all the blockades are designed to not let sound pass. We won't be leaving earlier than intended. I apologize that this has happened.
She looks completely different from the earlier picture. Can't you at least tell us why? Why is there a metal shutter here? This doesn't look normal at all.
My apologies, but as I said earlier, I'm not allowed to supply that information. But don't misinterpret me. Even though I could give you some details, I'm mostly kept in the dark when it comes to knowing the reasons. I'm only charged with making sure the system is functional, so I wouldn't be able to tell you much about what you want to know.
What are the details you know then? Look at it from our perspective. We can't stay in the dark forever.
I understand. I promise, however, I can't say anything.
We all felt the need to sigh. Knowing information was being kept from us wasn't a pleasant thought, and it disrupted any cooperation we might have wished for. However, it would have been unreasonable to press the issue further. 12 hours it is then. After saying that, he walked up to the shutter and tried to move it aside to confirm that it was as sturdy as it looked. Of course, it didn't budge at all. Shrugging a little, Sai turned back. This door wasn't closed, by the way. It was slightly open.
Yeah, I saw that.
And look, very little smoke passed through it. So it was opened after the smoke was released. Yes, it was closed when we were knocked out.
I was the one who opened it.
I see. I looked at the other door. Although it was closed, it appeared that more smoke had gone through it. There was something else piquing my curiosity. Kate, you said all methods of escape were sealed. What are those, or rather how many of them are on this floor?
On this floor, only this one. It doesn't have windows, so this is all that's locked. The other floors do have windows though, and they were fully sealed too as soon as the alarm went off.
I see. I'd assumed the smoke's goal was to isolate the event room, to have an easy path to it, obtain the gem and then leave with it, but that's strange. Strange? I think that's the most likely scenario too. I say that because the lobby has been left alone. If the goal was to bring the Sekimeiya outside, why wouldn't they also release the smoke here? After all, 2 full hallways were attacked, so why not the lobby too? Well, they must have known that it would all be blocked off and there would be no purpose to bringing the stone to the lobby anyway. Yeah, if the goal was to bring the Sekimeiya out during all the confusion, it doesn't make sense that they didn't do it here. I don't know what released the smoke, I didn't see anything in the hallways, but this is a much bigger room. It could be that whatever method they used simply wouldn't have worked here.
Oh, so they're saying not, like, do it here as well, but do it here instead of the room inside. Maybe. Or are they just saying, like, why wouldn't he have done it in the entire place? I mean, considering that there's no one here, like, you're gonna have to assume that there would have been no purpose to it anyway, but maybe. If you wanted to block off the security cameras only to then be spotted in this hall, your plan obviously wasn't very well thought out. Fair point. Could it be that leaving with the Sekimeiya wasn't the goal of the plan? Or maybe that they intend to do it later? You've grasped it, I think. Is it realistic to think anyone could alert everyone with smoke, leave with this incredibly rare item, and not be caught immediately? Even if the cameras were blocked, once outside you're still one of the last people to exit and wouldn't be allowed to leave freely and unexamined. There is something that comes to mind, and it's why I only asked about this floor's escape routes. The lobby was never used to escape. Now Kate says the windows on the upper floors are sealed, meaning if they are not, they provide a feasible way out. Keeping in mind that the alarm came late and that we never actually saw the Sekimeiya, could it be that by the time we stepped into the room, it already wasn't there? That's actually a good thought. The culprit could have gone up a floor to escape through the windows. Kate hasn't spoken about the footage of this time frame, so he might not have been looking at the cameras. Then again, even if the cameras spotted the culprit, they'd be able to leave through a prepared window route and flee immediately once outside. It's a good thought, it's probably a good plan. The game's gonna be going on for another 40 hours, so I don't think you're right. Then, use an automated mechanism to create the smoke and lock the tower right before the Sekimeiya is ever shown to the public. For the people outside, this would make it look as if it's still in the building and entirely obscure the time in which it was stolen. We started our session a bit later than expected because Shiria and I were slightly delayed, but even if we'd gone faster and seen the missing Sekimeiya, it wouldn't have meant anything to the person who'd successfully stolen it, since we'd soon be locked inside. If I assume some cameras recorded the culprit leaving through the window, it doesn't make sense that the smoke would then be deployed. However, if they also had a way around those cameras using another method, it would give off the illusion that someone who got trapped must have been the one to steal the Sekimeiya, and only after the smoke showed up. After all, the lobby was left untouched, and no one would have left through it after the smoke appeared. Since the alarm came later, whatever else the culprit did one floor above must have triggered it.
Maybe the culprit triggered it purposely, which is why it didn't match the smoke's timing. That would be a great plan that ended in success. I might be deluding myself a bit too much. I'm also assuming they were able to get the Sekimeiya out of the cabinet without being noticed, which is probably too hard to believe. Not to mention Naomi unlocked the cabinet with her key, meaning it was locked by that time. So why would the culprit lock it after getting the Sekimeiya out, let alone have a way to do it?
I believe it's far simpler than that, Sai.
Kate took a while to answer, while I'd been thinking he also had.
After all, the lobby doesn't have security cameras.
What? I realized immediately I'd already gone too far and got slightly embarrassed. Making up complicated theories was a habit of mine, but making a leap without even considering the facts was the last kind of mistake I needed to be making given the circumstances. Regardless, that seemed pretty ridiculous. It was a big lobby, so even though I couldn't spot any cameras, I'd figured they were well hidden. All of us frowned, doubting that decision.
I know it might sound strange. Next to the main door are guards who inspect everyone who enters, making sure they don't possess any kind of suspicious item.
For this very reason, the fact that a big quantity of smoke was somehow released from the inside is already very strange.
There's nothing of value in this lobby. The only way to access any valuable item is by entering the actual exhibition section through one of the two hallways. There is no other way to reach the gemstones aside from these two doors. Since there are cameras in the hallways, the entrance to the valuables is monitored. Having them here is simply not necessary.
What the hell? You guys are not very good at the security thing, are you?
We have our reasons, but nobody could steal anything and leave without being recorded.
But it meant with the smoked hallways, it was actually possible someone could have stolen something and left without being seen by the cameras. Although it was incredibly hard to believe that, once outside, they could have managed to leave with the stolen object, even more so after seeing how harsh the security measures were. Without a doubt, everyone who'd evacuated must have been searched to make sure they hadn't been in possession of anything suspicious. You said there's no way to make it to the actual rooms containing the gemstones. And what about that door? She was pointing at a smaller door situated behind the reception desk.
Oh, that leads to a room right under us. Past the door, a staircase goes to the room that stores the main boiler for the building, the electricity meter, the circuit breakers, and some pieces of furniture that we don't use anymore. Naturally, there are no cameras there either.
It's right under us?
Yes, the staircase is a semicircle, so that room, which we call the mechanical room, is below the lobby.
What about that computer? Can we use it for anything?
No, as I said earlier, the internet connection has been cut. That's not all though. The alarm also disabled this computer so that the people trapped inside couldn't look through its files.
Is the door locked?
It's not. Since it's right behind the reception counter, visitors can't enter it. I doubt the room could have been used for anything regarding this incident. Even if someone managed to make it inside, they would have needed a key to access the breakers, but it's not like the lights went out.
I think Sai is mainly getting at the point that, while no one could have entered beforehand, they might have been able to escape to it now after all this has happened. This might be where we find Naomi. Off we go. Would Naomi have had that key?
Naomi? No, that's not part of her job. I do have it, but I don't think I've ever used it.
As a thought, could we power off the system in charge of the alarm to open up the exit?
No, of course not. It would be a big oversight if a thief could go there, force open the lid and then break free. Not every circuit can be handled from that room, only the basic ones that power on the lights and such. Essential operations like the security system and maintenance functions can't be turned off.
I see. With another escape method eliminated, our spirits sank. Meanwhile, Isla seemed captivated by our talk and stared at us intensely.
What is that?
She seemed to be looking at Shira's neck. This? It's a pendant. I believe it's tanzanite, right? Yeah.
Oh, it's really pretty. I want one like it.
You said it's tanzanite? I really doubt that. This seems to be an imitation. They are very common.
Is that so? I don't know. Shira gave him a terse reply, obviously displeased.
If it's not, then that gem must be worth an immense sum.
It doesn't matter though, I really like it. Isla, you wanted to say something else before, right? What was it?
Yeah, we came here for the Sekimeiya, right? I just wanted to go see it.
She glanced down, expecting to get scolded, but nobody reacted that way. There's no way it's still there, right? What even was it? Sai began looking at me and ended his sentence at Akuro. We hadn't mentioned that we hadn't yet seen the Sekimeiya, so since I'd freely spoken about it having been stolen, it was only natural he had assumed we'd seen it missing. Actually, we don't know. We never saw it. We were gonna check it when we woke up, but Erina's shouts interrupted us. Are you serious? Chiraya and Akuro nodded as well, and everyone else had the same look as Sai. It seemed they'd all assumed the Sekimeiya had been stolen. Once again, without warning, Sai made his way out of the lobby. Isla was the first to follow him. No one objected, as we were all curious about what the Sekimeiya actually was and whether it would even be there. And this is where we're gonna end this week's Indie Sunday. I think that's a good ending point. No, don't worry. I mean, you can just go and buy the game yourself and play through it. That is certainly an option if you can't wait. But I've enjoyed this very much so far, so I do actually plan to continue it. And it could take the place that Corpse Factory is currently occupying, being sort of a Monday video once a week. So not entirely sure how long Corpse Factory is still gonna go on. Probably for quite a few more weeks, so it might be 2 months or so until we continue with this. But yeah, so far having a lot of fun. Some of the dialogue was a bit clumsy at the beginning, and I'm just glad it didn't drag on too much until we got to the mystery part, which that's always one of my complaints sometimes, well, a lot of times with mysteries, like in, I don't know, Detective Conan, for example, where a lot of the times, like, if an episode's like 20 minutes or if it's a two-parter, and like the introduction before you even get to the mystery part is like 15 minutes or 10 minutes, I'm like, I just get on with it. I don't care about why you're here, what's going on, just give me the mystery. And I mean, considering this is a super long game, it's not unreasonable to have like 2-3 hour introduction to everything, but it basically had 20 minutes and then we were right in, which I like a lot. And yep, so far enjoying it, and I hope you enjoyed this video as well. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Till then, bye.